Namaste. My name is Preeti Upala, and I am a global thought leader and a multimedia personality. Welcome to my podcast, The Preeti Experience. Join me as I explore some of the most fascinating and crucial issues that affect our world today. I take a unique global perspective on these issues, and the very foundation of my insights is humanity and spirituality. I'm Preeti Upala, and welcome to the Preeti Experience.
Sir, we just got Mr. Eric Solem, sir, former director, executive director of UNEP. We got Mr. Rajendra Shende, sir, former executive director of UNEP. We got Priyanka Biswa, ma'am, who's a NSS Presidential Medal awardee. Uh, and we also got youth representatives from the United Nations as well. So we are very pleased to have you here today. So I'll just first request Pratyush to just give a brief intro about what Spartan really is and what we have done over the last couple of days. So Pratyush, over to you now.
All right, Deep. Thank you so much. So, guys, we had a hectic week. Yesterday we had the Modelian conference, which was simulated all throughout the day. We had our awardees, we had our guest speakers. There were 3 keynote sessions, as Deep just mentioned, and all of them were pretty, exhaustive. And we had a lot of people joining us, particularly in the late night show of Mr. Eric Solem and Rajendra Shende sir. We almost had 70 to 80 people joining us from all across the world. We were expecting a little bit more in this session as well. Maybe we'll get them over, the length of the show. But, since it's a lunchtime here, we have invited our friends as well. So hope to get a few more people. So talking about Spartan, we started off with an idea of a small Modelian conference, but ultimately expanded to include talk shows, and we, expanded to kind of include a lot of other events to such as bands and artists. So we have a few foreign bands and artists playing for us on 5th of June as well, so that will be coming later. So we are really happy to have Preeti Upala ma'am here amongst us, and this talk show will be all about her. So I would request Deep to explain the format in which we'll be proceeding, and if your friends haven't joined yet, the recording will also be live streamed on Facebook after this entire session is done. Thank you everyone for joining us here. Deep, over to you.
Thanks, Pratyush. So, ma'am, this will be a talk show, which will be a format of a Q&A and a presentation. So you can just present at the beginning, or I can just start asking questions. We got a lot of them now. So, ma'am, over to you now.
All right. So I think I'll give my presentation first, and then the questions will naturally come through. So should I start with a brief introduction of myself, and then I'll just move on to the topic?
Obviously, ma'am. Exactly.
Okay, cool. Namaste, everyone. Honored to be a part of your Spartan Digital Conclave. My name is Preeti Upala, and I'm coming to you from Los Angeles, California. A little bit about myself. I'm a former investment banker turned multimedia entrepreneur, and I'm based in LA. I do many things here. I've got my own radio show called The Eternal Hour, as well as my own news show called The Preeti Experience. I am a geopolitical analyst. I write for several outlets around the world, including the Times of Israel and Jerusalem Post, and The Observer and Foreign Policy News. I write on mainly geopolitics, international affairs, conflict resolution, peace, religion, US-India relations, Middle East policy, and so on. I speak around the world. I'm so honored to have spoken at some fantastic venues. I work with some think tanks, including the Observer Research Foundation that's based here in Delhi. What else? I'm writing my first book, and I'm very excited that it's going to come out at the end of this year. I see myself as a global citizen. I've been to almost 100 countries, and I love traveling. My two passions in life are spirituality and international travel, and whatever I do, I combine the two. So my dharma in life is to empower and inspire people through my work and my presence. So that's a little bit about me. And I thought I would bring a topic for you guys today that I think is topical, and you'll learn a lot. And I think it's something for the future, like it's going to be with us for the next several decades, which is the U.S.-India relations. And I think it's important to know where this relationship has been in order to know where this relationship is going. I would actually argue that in the coming few decades, this relationship is probably the most important strategic alliance in the world, because I think what we are seeing in the new world order is there are essentially three powers who are, superpower, of course, the US, and then the two emerging ones are India and China. Now, thanks to this COVID, I think people are having second thoughts about China, and I'm sure it'll bypass the US in terms of GDP. But I think being a superpower is more than just the economy. I think it's so much more than that. And you do have to look at, is it stable? Is it a moral power? Is it responsible? And all of those things in which I think India would fare a lot higher, which would make it more attractive, I think, to any nation, but especially the US. So on paper, these two countries, the US and India, should be the best of allies, right? They are both secular uh, democracies, liberal democracies. They have a market access, capitalistic form of I mean, they both use capitalism, at least for us, since 1991. That's the method that we have used. And we both have shared interests, the similar moral values, moral compass, traditions, I think family, education, all of those, even faith, I would say, all of those things make us very similar to each other. And even more important than that, I think, are shared threats. I think both for India and the US, the two biggest threats in the world, I think moving forward, are one is, of course, a rising imperialistic China, and the second is religious terrorism, which both countries have been plagued with. So if these two countries have so much in common, then why have they not been the best of allies? So let's look at sort of where this relationship is. uh, in order to assess how strong two countries the relationship is, you have to look at three things. You have to look at trade, you have to look at sort of political system or governance style, and then you have to look at military. So in terms of trade, today they do 150 billion US dollars in trade. That is actually a good number. You'll be surprised to know that India actually, it's in the favor of India. So India uh, exports more services than it imports actually from the US. And the technological services are the number one sort of export. So this is great for India. I think it can do much better. It could probably double that in the next few years. I think we have to lift our own tariffs and make things easier for these US companies to come and work in India if we want to double that value, which I think is very doable. The second one, of course, is the political system. They're both democracies and secular liberal, so we have no issues there. So you can tick those two boxes. The third one is more interesting, the military aspect. Now, I think we are beginning to see both the US and India conduct exercises, right? I think the Navy has been like the US Navy exercises with the Indian Navy more than with anybody else in the world. So this is great. And we are beginning to buy advanced American military equipment. We didn't always purchase weapons and arms from the US because obviously, we had this great long-standing relationship with Soviet Union and then Russia. So a lot of our weaponry and so on came from Russia. But only recently, I think India has decided to buy a bunch of equipment, like the recent Namaste Trump event in India uh, resulted in a $3 billion sale of buying these American equipment. Essentially, it was consisted of those MH-60 um, and Apache helicopters, among other things. So I think with the military aspect, there is still some scope because I just think that the US probably would like us to buy more, to depend less on Russia and more on them. Obviously, Russia and the US are adversaries, so they're not happy. And I think we have a funny situation where we have mix and match, equipment that don't always communicate with each other. Like, I don't think the American systems are designed to communicate with a Russian system, for example. We obviously we try to make it work, but it's a very incoherent, it's not consistent, and we end up getting sort of hit. I mean, we have all sorts of issues with that. We have to make a decision, I think, moving forward, how strong our relationship with the Soviet Union should be. So when we look back in the past, one of the reasons why post-independence India has had this a strong relationship with Soviet Union is obviously it went for this sort of non-aligned movement, right? And it's always been non-aligned. It wants to be a lot friends with everybody and have no adversaries. I'm not so sure how that worked out, but they were non-aligned. But then when they needed help, there were only a few countries that came. They didn't sign up with NATO, so you didn't have US help and you didn't have any of the NATO countries. So it was actually the Soviet Union that came to our rescue in all of the wars. I think almost all of the wars that we had with the neighboring countries, China and of course Pakistan, and especially when you look at 1971 and wars that we decisively won. We have to thank the few countries that did help us out, and the US was of no help. In fact, I think the 71, they were really adversarial. And luckily, we were able to win despite the US not sort of coming through. So, I think we always have the memory of that. And we are probably have a little bit of a trust issue, to be honest. So, when I'm looking at thorns in this relationship, that's one. I mean, essentially, it's about alliances. You know, we have uh, great relationships with Iran, Russia, and even with China. And all of these countries are adversarial to the US. So from a US perspective, they don't want us to be so close to their worst enemies. But from our perspective, we have had independent relationships with these countries, and we've had a long history with them, and we don't just walk away. I don't think that is a smart idea. I think Iran is incredibly important as well, not just because we've used to buy a lot of our oil from them. We don't so much anymore, but I think there are other reasons. In the recent few months after the Afghan deal and so on, I think the port in Chabahar, where India has access to, I think that is incredibly important. There have been times where that was dormant, but I think now when you look at the situation, I actually think that becomes very, very important for us. We must not lose that. And for that, you have to have a good relationship with Iran. And I think you must not do things that would get them upset. So you have to manage that relationship, I think. With Russia, of course, we've never had any issues with them. They've always been supportive. I think you have to, again, balance out that relationship with both the US and Russia. I think it would serve us in the long run to be friendly to both. With China, I mean, a few months ago, I would say we have had a decent working relationship. We do a lot of trade with them. I think people forget that India's future also depends on its business and trade relationship with China, right? Because we import export so much from them. So they are a part of our economic success story. So you can't just kind of walk away from them. And I think today there are some tensions, obviously, in Ladakh area and Aksai and so on. But I think the Indian government needs to be measured and do the diplomatic thing there. Of course, you don't want any encroachment of your territory. They're kind of pushing it a little bit. I think you have to have conversation and communicate with them and just make sure that the borders are honored. I don't think you want a situation where you want to escalate this. It won't be good for either. And certainly for your relationship moving forward, it won't be good. I think China also realizes this. Now, it's funny because the Minister of External Affairs, Dr. Jaishankar, he has spoken many times about the US-India relationship. And I just want to read out a few things, starting with the actual trade that we do together. I think these numbers will be very important for you, or you might find it very interesting. So the trade has quadrupled in the last 10 years to 150 billion US. The US investments in India have crossed 50 billion, and I think the Indian investments in the US has also it's less than that. It's maybe half. India has cleared 286 projects worth almost 100 billion in the recent years. Indian companies have invested 25 billion in the US, 350 million of which are in research and development alone. And recently, the Indian aircraft defense contracts have created 40,000 jobs in the US. So a fair dialogue should take place considering India's priorities and concerns. Demonizing the climate of doing business in India by US companies could end up being counterproductive. I also want to point out that the H-1B1 work visa situation is an interesting one. People think that it's such a great opportunity for Indian professionals, but I actually think the real beneficiary of that is the US, because we have our brightest and best going over there and contributing to their technological advancement. Because I think the real USP for the US actually is technology. And I think that the best USP for India is technological development and services. So it's really the same thing. And I think when our professionals go over there, they are able to create the best. I mean, all the CEOs of the top tech companies in the US today are all Indian, right? And this is only increasing, I think, by the day. So the US needs to understand that any curbing of the H-1B visa actually affects the US more than it does to India, because guess what? These professionals can go anywhere. They can go to Canada, Germany, UK, Australia, anywhere. They can even stay in India and I think get big bucks. Today, I think things have changed a lot. And I think some entrepreneurs are even doing that. Also, Dr. Jayashankar has said before that if we look at the growth area of this relationship, the ability and willingness to work together is there. I do see and hear in America that wants a partnership-based relationship and a management of world security. Of course, you look at Silicon Valley, half of Silicon Valley is pretty much run by Indians as well. Once these two countries have a political and military comfort level, we can come into any situation with harmony and can collaborate on many global initiatives, whether it's humanitarian or counterterrorism exercises. Relationships are never easy. The grand strategy underwriting our ties is fundamentally sound. It needs maintenance from time to time, and once in a while, even an upgrade. So he's spoken very good things about this relationship. When you look at the thorns, I think one is, of course, alliances from the US perspective. And then from our perspective, I think obviously the big elephant in the room is when the US continues to give billions in aid to our greatest adversary, our neighbor, who that money never goes into development or infrastructure. It always goes towards their nuke program and also their terror funding, because I think their economy is really run on this terrorism network. So, until the US really stops the funding completely, we are not going to really be that comfortable. And this has been going on for decades, right? So that's a big one. I think recently the purchase of the S-400 missile system from Russia by India was obviously not something that the US was happy with. Some people are wondering if we did the right thing. It's too late now. We've bought it. We have to make the best of that um, situation. There are, I think the US is finally understanding India's kind of place in the world, right? I think for too long, uh, I don't think these great powers really took us for the force that we are. And now I think because of the size, because of the economy, because of our scope and influence, they can't ignore us anymore. And I think the US realizes that it if it wants to continue to be this great power in the future, the next 50 years, that would involve actually having a very strong relationship with India. Now, the Secretary of State, Mike Pompeo, has also said several things about this relationship. I just wanted to read a few things because I think it's interesting to see it from his point of view. He says, great friends are bound to have great differences. Um, he has said that he's committed to ensure that India has military capability to uphold its territorial integrity and sovereignty. And this would include intelligence sharing and information sharing, specifically to fight religious terrorism. And he also admits that China's BRI, which is the Belt and Road Initiative, all across the subcontinent is very problematic. It comes not just with strings attached, but shackles. So he definitely acknowledges that. And he assures that the US stands by India's safety needs and that both countries will plot a path forward. Now, when I look at areas where the relationship can improve, it's research, AI. I think this is the way of the future. I think both these countries can offer a lot in that area. I think they are already working together, and they might work together even more. Thanks to COVID, we have seen, I think, just what China is capable of, which puts India in a very sweet spot. I think for the first time ever, it finds itself in an interesting situation where just because it's not China, it's seen as an alternative to China. And I think it can really show the world what it's made of. A very responsible moral power, which is going to take everybody along with it. And I think people have been very wary of the Chinese governance and leadership and their ideas for world domination. And India doesn't have those kind of aspirations. Obviously, our greatest export actually is spirituality, and we've done that in great ways. But I think we can do that even more, because I find kind of the world looking east and kind of looking towards India for even more spiritual development. Even with the COVID, of course, with the hydrochloroquine, making that available to a lot of countries because it produces what 70 of that in the world. So I think that during COVID, India has really stepped up, and it has shown the world just what it can do. And I think many countries are indebted to India, which is great. It can use this as sort of as a trump card in the future. And I think even with the vaccine, I don't know where that will go, but I do believe that India and the US are working together to come up with a vaccine. And if there is one, I'm sure that there will be Indian scientists that played a big part in that. Um, Finally, soft power. I think not enough is said about soft power. I think we have a great culture, incredible civilizational history, and so much richness that we have contributed to the world. And I think that soft power is incredibly important now, especially post COVID, because I think the hard power, no one's impressed. So India, I don't think, has exercised its soft power as much as it could. So I think it's time that it flexes its soft power as well as its hard power. And that means sort of showcasing its culture, cuisine, everything, even more. Book, spirituality, thought leaders, way of doing things. I think frameworks will be very important, whether it's politics or feminism or whatever. We have our way of doing things that we've had for a long time that actually works and is sound. And I think the West could really benefit from that. So there are so many areas, I think, where these two countries can even strengthen their relationship even more. It's a shame that they're not already doing it, but look, these things they have a trajectory of their own, sort of a pattern of their own, and it's been up and down. I think there's some sort of fateful story with this relationship, and I do see them getting closer and working together in the future. I think from the U.S. perspective, India is more than just a shoulder for the U.S. to take aim at China with. If I can put it in those terms, it's seen really as an alternative, I think, to China, not just in the region but in the world at large. I think that history um, beckons, and no, history compels, and destiny beckons that these two great powers will dance together in the future. So I have incredible confidence that we'll see a very, very strong relationship. Of course, the two leaders get along, they have immense respect and genuine fondness with each other, which we haven't always seen, to be honest. And if Trump wins again, there will be another almost 4 or 5 years, I think, of that bonhomie, which will work out pretty well, I think, for India. Um, let's wait and see what happens with the elections. But I do think that it's going to be a very it takes two to tango. I think it's going to be a great dance. So with that, I want to end my talk, and I will thank you for your attention and time, and love to take your questions and any feedback.
Yes, ma'am. So I'll just start with my questions.
Yes.
So, ma'am, you were talking about India emerging after the COVID as a great power, and this
Yeah.
was the same view that was reiterated by all the experts that were there yesterday. So, ma'am, how much effective do you think that the 20,000 rupee crores of that package Mr. Narendra Modi has developed? Leading financial analysts suggest that it is just about 0.5% the work that will be done from this package. So, how much effective do you think is that regarding the economic post-COVID economy of India?
So, look, this COVID has affected every economy in the world, including the U.S. I think everybody should just maybe accept that, and you have to manage your expectations. And uh, I think we were growing at a very fast rate, and then there was a kind of a little dip, and then this happened. So I think to now expect again the kind of rates that even we were having before won't be the same, right? I think so. You have to manage your expectations. I've heard many different theories about. I mean, I've heard different financial analysis on. Sorry, about. What is this? about the stimulus package, on how it has worked, whether it was uh, enough, not enough. I would say it seems like, I think it's a good amount, but I don't know if it's going to the right places. I've seen, I think the people that really need it, that need cash, right? It didn't go to them. And I know I think India has managed COVID very well, but that migrant crisis situation, I was looking at that, and I was a little just kind of disheartened. I think that all these people, there were like literally millions of them, that are kind of homeless and almost in the middle of nowhere. They are the ones who need a stimulus injection, and I'm not so sure if they're going to get it in the time that they need. So as long as they get taken care of, and because they should want to come back to work, right? I think they're financially okay, but once they're back home, when all of this gets lifted, people will be wanting all of these workers. And what if they have been so disheartened that they don't want to go back to the cities? So I think as long as that stimulus package reaches them somehow, then I think it would look, it is what it is. It's, I think it's a smaller amount than they could have, but I mean, you don't want to blow all of that, right, in a stimulus package, because it's gone in one hit, and that's a big chunk that goes. And yeah.
Exactly, ma'am. That's what the leading economist Abhijit Banerjee also just suggested. So we have one question from our guests. Karan Thakur says, ma'am, what is your view regarding the US pulling out as a top funder to the World Health Organization?
That's a great question. So it's funny that they're pulling out just when India got appointed, as the executive chairmanship, because I
Yes,
think the US would have liked to have been a part of the WHO, while India was sort of taking care of it. I think that would have been the best situation. So they pulled out maybe too soon, I think. I can see why they're so disappointed. The WHO has not been transparent, especially with this COVID thing, and they're kind of not being upfront and transparent. When they knew something was up, they did not act in time, and they, in conjunction with the Chinese Communist Party, very irresponsible, I would say. I think even if we knew 2 or 3 weeks before, I think 80% of the cases would not have happened, apparently, around the world, right? So it's a bit unfortunate. Um, if the US thinks that they don't want to fund this organization that they think is useless, uh, that's their prerogative. I think people forget that US is like the biggest funder of all of these institutions, and some of these institutions are antagonistic to um, the US, including the UN sometimes. So if they're funding something that's not doesn't have their best interests, they don't have to. They can pull out. I just think that the WHO is in good hands now. So maybe they may reconsider, I don't know. But I think if there was a time to work with the WHO, it would be now.
yes, ma'am. Also, I guess US has the same views regarding NATO. So, ma'am, we also have another question, that is regarding the Belt and Road Initiative and the
Yes.
developments in the South China Sea regarding to China, India-China relations.
So what is is there an exact question?
Yes, ma'am. The questions, there are many questions regarding this thing. The main point is that what will be the relations between India and China after this developments?
Interesting. I have a feeling, and I think if you look at the top analysts for this BRI, uh, they don't think it's going to really manifest in the end, right? It's not all actually going to happen the way China imagines it, because they've already spent billions. So CPEC is really what we are concerned with, because CPEC, the China-Pakistan Economic Corridor, it goes through parts of POK, which are technically Indian land, right? So the minute they start doing anything there, then we can make a big, hubbub about that on the world stage. And I really think we should, for a change, absolutely do that. Make some noise, because that would be an illegal thing what they're doing, and even the UN would recognize that it's not sort of Chinese land or Pakistani land that they can just build without permission. I think India has kind of it's got more of a claim to that. So that's when I think we can, sort of be assertive about that. And I'm not even sure what they're going to end up doing in the POK region, but if they do try anything, I think we can tackle that. I think the Southeast Asia area is very problematic for China, because even though you have these countries kind of cozying up to them or getting closer, I don't think that anybody actually trusts them, right? So I think in the end, they, like Sri Lanka, it'll be that situation where they sort of want to get in business, but in the end, maybe they pull out or they go half at it, and it just doesn't pan out that well. So I think the Southeast Asian area will be problematic for China. Uh, Africa is an unfortunate situation. They have bought up lots of different parts, right? But again, their projects have been stalled there, and even the COVID thing has stalled a lot of this. I think they have poured too much money into this BRI thing, and I'm not so sure they're going to get the return. And I don't think it'll all get built the way they dream of. I don't think there's going to be some great route going all the way from China to Europe, which is what they dream of, right? I think it'll just be some bits and pieces of some sort of connectivity. That's what my take is. I hope that I'm right. I think I'm right, but I just think that CPEC is not going to be a thing.
And don't you think that it's a debt trap by China? And how much
For
effective
Pakistan,
could
it
it
is,
be as a
yeah.
debt trap by China?
It is because, yeah, it's actually, it's not even good for them. They are losing money. And I think for Pakistan, it's very, very sticky situation to get so entrenched where they will be owned, right, in the end. But they don't think like that. They just think it's, I think they're more kind of transactional in that way, right? So whoever is willing to do any business with them or give them the concessions, they're happy to take that and do what's needed to be done. So it is it's not, it's a mousetrap for everybody involved, I think. And I think India was very right to never be a part of that in the first place.
Also, ma'am, I guess their investments in Afghanistan have backfired regarding the current political situation that has just been a deadlock. And I don't guess that there will be any financial benefits that China might gain from it. What's your views on that?
Yeah, again, yeah, the Afghan situation is also in flux, because this deal has apparently been signed, but I mean, I think this COVID has put a spanner in the works. And I think with America and Trump, they could just tear that up and uh, say they change their mind. They can do that at any time. And I actually hope that they do that, because I don't think it was a good deal. I think it was the worst deal in history. It's not a peace deal at all. It's basically a surrender plea, and they are basically saying, please let me go, you do whatever you want, you have it all. And it's very dangerous, because you leave a vacuum there that is very easily going to be filled by the ISI and those unsavory elements, and they will release the thousands of trained jihadis, uh, and the Taliban will take over all parts. And we actually become the biggest victims of that, because they will e- I mean, they will be close to Kashmir and close to India, and you don't want these people hanging around anywhere near Kashmir, right? So I hope that they renege on the deal, or something happens and they change their mind and they, um, I don't know, either renegotiate or just uh, kind of walk out of it. I really think that India should have played a bigger part in Afghanistan because we've been a part of, clearly it's important to us. I think we could have done more, um, because I think what Pakistan does, what we don't, is I think it makes itself available, and it gives, like US is always looking for things that it needs, and Pakistan has given it the things that it needs when it needed it. We could have, but we didn't. So what do you expect? I think we should learn some lessons from the way that even we've dealt with this relationship, um, because I think what we couldn't give them, they got it from elsewhere. And even though it's less than satisfactory, they're stuck now, right? So we have to come in and prove that we can actually give them something that even Pakistan can't give. And I really think that we can do so much. So maybe even now there is room for our government to say, look, whatever, whether it's financial or people or something, we can support you, and we can support their elected government, right? Which is very friendly to India. So um, I think they have to rethink this Afghan plan and go back to the US and try to come up with something else.
Ma'am, already the Russia has shown interest in this power vacuum that's developed in Afghanistan, and they just want to be in the line of fire. So, what do you think is India's chances at this moment regarding investments in Afghanistan, or regarding just improvements in Afghanistan?
Yeah, I don't know what Russia wants to do there because it's been there for a long, long time and it hasn't really done much. They say that that Afghan region is where all empires go to die. Everybody who's gone there has lost and surrendered and is done. So including sort of uh, Russia or so on. Even could you say Soviet Union even? Um, I think if India wants to do anything in that region, you have a direct connection with Afghani people and the Afghan government. There's no need to go via Russia. I think you must do your own thing in this case. Um, Russia's not adversarial. They won't thwart your plans, or they're not going to ruin your game, so to speak. So you can be confident that you can go do your thing. I think even China is not going to try anything. I think it's time that we have more confidence in ourselves and go and do these things without being so fearful of what the rest of the world thinks about us. Because I think we've always been very iffy and not very really confident of who we are and what we're capable of. Because I think we're actually much more capable than we think we are. And what I see is the whole world is waiting for India to really step up and be this global leader and take a leadership role. And we're not doing it. We're only starting to do it now. And I think it's time that we really just put our foot down, and um, maybe, show the world what we're made of. Because I really think everybody's waiting for that.
Ma'am, we have a question from Karan Thakur. He asks that do you believe Nepal's territorial integrity has been violated by India in line with the Lipulek incident?
Ooh, that's an interesting thing because that area, I mean, it's disputed, I suppose, but I think technically it was given to India, right, for
Yes, we
to
have.
to kind of take care of. So um, I think it's so sad to see us having these petty quarrels with neighbors who we really shouldn't be having issues with, especially like Nepal. We shouldn't be having a problem with them, right? Sri Lanka, we really shouldn't be having a problem with them either. And I don't think we did anything. I don't think we usually do many things wrong, but a lot of things get done wrong against us, and then we kind of get exposed, and then we don't always handle it well. So then we end up suffering for it. So I think the foreign office and the government must be diplomatic. I think Nepal is important because this current their prime minister, he's not going to be around forever. So however he is, he'll leave one day, and then there'll be a new leader. So, but I think the relationship between India and Nepal is important. So you must sometimes overlook the shorter transactional relationship for the long-term vision and alliance, which I think Nepal will be very important for us on so many levels, right? So I think we should be measured with that, and but we didn't do anything wrong. So just hold your own and ignore, I think, the rhetoric, because I think that's all that it is, rhetoric.
Ma'am, regarding India's soft power, there were a lot of protests regarding the NRC and CAA. So there was also a petition filed in the UNHRC by the International Council of Jurists, which I am a member of. So, ma'am, what's your views regarding this scene?
So I think that CAA was needed and fair, and I don't think there was anything wrong. I think India needs it. It's uh, a thing. It's long time coming. You know, I think it's so late, but it's better late than never. And it's a small sort of reprieve for these poor, stateless, you know, or whatever 30,000 refugees that have been around for decades, who deserve to be helped. Right? They have fled countries that have a state religion, and it is recorded how much persecution, religious persecution, happens in those countries. This is a fact. So if India has every right to give refuge to those people that have been religiously persecuted in the neighborhood. It's a sort of a part of the partition story. That's why it's these three specific countries. So it's a completely sound thing. It's a good thing. I think where India failed was communicating that to the rest of the world, especially the US and the UN and so on, because it's just a matter of articulating it. I think if anyone actually read it, they would realize how logical it is. It's not discriminatory at all. I'm not sure how you could call it discriminatory, that it goes beyond my logic. In the US, you have the Lautenberg Agreement, is the same thing, right? So the US will give refuge to persecuted Jews around the world. I think India can give refuge to persecuted whoever it wants to, and it has. And this is still 30,000 is not a big number. Uh, it's a one-off thing. It's done. I think it's great. Um, I also think that these institutions that uh, had an issue with India. I don't think India needs a lecture on secularism or liberalism or freedom or anything like that from the West, because they are struggling to have the kind of secularism and independence and freedom that we actually enjoy in India. So they have no right to tell us uh, how to do things, or how to run ourselves and what to do. Uh, there are many vested interests who are very disappointed when you say things like, I think the conversion issue is very important, because we've had a lot of kind of cases of that, and that's not okay. It should be illegal, I think. So if the government of India wants to put a stop to that, I think they have a right to. I don't see why some body in America should have a problem with what's happening in a sovereign country thousands of miles away. It's kind of moronic, because we don't comment on what's going on in American domestic policy. I don't think they have a right to comment really on what we are doing, right? So that's with the religious freedom thing. And um, I think some of these things are, there were also a couple of cities I think one in Minnesota, that passed this resolution kind of against the CAA. And it was pretty tight, but anyway, they passed it. But guess what? It's not legally binding. It's just some resolution they had in their city council. They had a vote, whatever. They got a result. They declared something. It means nothing. India does not even have to um, take that thing seriously, and it won't. Or I don't. Maybe the government doesn't even know that this happened. It probably shouldn't even know. It's not even important. It's shameful that these city councils here in America, and there are vested interests that have been lobbying for this. Sadly, I think we'll see some more, but there are very strong lobbies against India. So I think these bodies will say whatever they want, but we should not take the bait. I think we know what we're doing, and we should do everything that's in our best interest.
Yes, ma'am. The resolutions obviously are nothing but a just show of strength, I guess, and it has no legal validity. But, ma'am, most of the protests that were in India were regarding the politicization of the NRC and CA by the ruling party. So, what do you think about the politicization of the incident? Because in Assam, we just saw a lot of government employees coming up with claims that they have been told to uh, just act on a particular section of the society. So, what are your views on the regarding that?
Yeah, well, firstly, I think the largest kind of democracy in the world deserves to have a citizen registry. I think this is needed. Every country has one, right? I think you do need to know exactly who's in the country and so on. So it's needed. Um, Look, I think these everything is politicized today. COVID is politicized. Feminism is politicized. Women's rights are politicized. Human rights are politicized. So sadly, everything is getting weaponized. Um, I think NRC just in Assam is it's going to work out in a different way, and in the rest of the country, it's going to work out in another way altogether. Um, Again, it's totally okay to do the NRC, but I think they didn't communicate that well even within India, I think, to the people. The people don't need to be scared unnecessarily, right? I think we are very benevolent in many ways. We are not hard, uh, tough like many other countries would be. Like in America, law enforcement or the court system or whatever, they're just so tough, right? But in India, I think we are much more compassionate than that. So Indian citizens should not be, or anybody, residents or anyone in India should not be worried that anybody is going to do anything unlawful or something that's rogue. I think everything is legitimate and legal. They should have communicated better. I think if you're going to do NRC, you must do it. You can't do it at once. You must be slow and steady and do it very gradually. Look at different parts of the country, maybe the easiest ones or whatnot, and kind of make it fluid so eventually people will get it and be okay with it. But I think I think either the prime minister or the government needs to come out and give some speeches and whatever, explaining that it is not going to be scary or harmful or discriminatory in any way, right? I think they need assurance. That I do think they need, which I don't think they got yet on this issue. So I think the government needs to do better job with communication for sure.
Ma'am, regarding the containment centers, there were a lot of reports coming from news agencies where they just visited the containment centers that were being built, but the government formally has rejected that India is building any concentration camps or something like that. So, ma'am, don't you think that if India denies such involvement, but every day some news agencies are coming in with the construction videos of containment camps, doesn't it hamper the soft image that we, soft power dominance that we have right now?
Yeah, sadly these small amount of media outlets that have an agenda and want to create some image of India that's not very positive. I think they forget the damage that can be done, and it's only. I mean, we will just refute sometimes it's fake news, it's false reporting, right? And we can just down on it and everybody knows, okay, this was manufactured or they made it up. The problem is the Western media knows very little about India, and they get their sources from these outlets, right? The ones that peddle all of this. So you end up with the fake news travels across the world. Um, there's not much you can do about it because the outlets in the West get funding from various places which want this negative image anyway. So they're looking for that sort of reporting, and they know where to get it from. Um, Again, I think maybe the government does need to put out statements. Maybe they have to release videos and so on, showing that there is nothing there. It's not a center and it's not ready. Nobody is going to be put there and whatnot. Um, I mean, they should also say if we if somebody is not going to be included in the NRC, and they don't the CAA doesn't cover them as well, what happens to them? I think you need to do something about it, because you might end up with millions of people, tens of millions of people that fall in that category. And I don't think you want to keep them. I mean, instead of keeping them in a jail, wouldn't it be better to actually release them into the economy, and maybe they can work hard and do something good for the country? They are of no use being locked up. It's complete waste of money. So that's even silly to begin with. I think they have to let the country know what they have in mind. Whatever, maybe there is a way where these people that are going to be left out, how can they be of service? Maybe there is a way that they can be of service. I'm sure there is. And are they willing to do that? Then maybe they can join the army or something like that, something that is really tangible, because we need people, right? So maybe that might be an option.
Okay, ma'am. So yes, the legality of the NRC and CFA can be questioned in both the ways, as Honorable Justice Harish Salve just pointed out. But ma'am, currently regarding the situation, we have just one conclusive statement to ask from you regarding the geopolitical scenario post the COVID world.
I think that if if COVID has shown the world anything, it has shown the world that what a um, weak and vulnerable state the world was in, and the old world order was not working. So it actually showed the fault lines in the existing power structure, and it also showed how dangerous some aspects of this Chinese leadership is. And it also showed us what should be important when we are looking for uh, superpowers. And, it's not just economy and military, it's much more than that. And I think it sheds a spotlight on what a good power would look like. And I think India fits the bill. So, if anything, it has actually sort of showcased India to the world in the right light, that here's a country that actually has managed this pandemic very well. Um, they were extremely disciplined, and also they are what they stand for, and the power that they would be in the future would be very attractive to the world, as opposed to what's not attractive. I think it's almost kind of comparing China and India. I think that's really the big lesson that I get out of it. And then you look at the US, and it's pummeled, right? So this great power, it has not delivered, right? Has not stepped up to the mark, which showed a weakness there too. It also showed the need for America and India to work together. So I think it exposed a lot of things that we maybe, I know analysts obviously knew this, but I think the masses didn't. I speak to a lot of people here in the US, and also through my talks around the world, and I think almost everybody is impressed with India during this time, and just in general. And they can't say the same about China. In fact, everybody is very disappointed and angry. And I think this is a sweet spot for India, time for it to step up. And I do think that there will be a new world order, and India is definitely going to play a part. Also, with the UN Security Council, I think in a few years' time, when India is going to become the most populous country, I just think that you can't have such a great, such a big country, such an old civilization, not be a part of the Security Council. So I think there has to be reforms made, and I think it is like basically first on the list to get accepted, and I think that's going to happen, and I think that's a good day, a great day when that happens, because we have rogue countries that are already permanent members, and yet a power like India is not. There's a great saying that some ambassador once said, that if you don't have a seat at the table, then you're on the menu. And I think we have been on the menu for a long time. And I think it's time to get our high chair.
Thank you so much, ma'am. That was Preeti Uppala, ma'am, leading geopolitical analyst and former Mr. India for you. I'll just now request Pratyush for the closing statements.
Thank you so much. Namaste.
All right. Thank you so much, ma'am, for joining us, taking out time from your busy schedule. And this brings us all to an end to the keynote sessions that we had for Spartan Digital Conclave. I hope this video will reach out to as many people as possible after we actually post this on various social medias, because people would rather watch it in their free times rather than joining a talk session. That's what we inferred. Though the count was less, but I'm sure we'll be able to reach out to as many people as we have been expecting, right? So thank you, Deep. It was a lovely session, and maybe we could look forward to more such sessions in the future with ma'am and other guests from diverse profiles, so as to diversify our experience as a whole. Thank you so much. And we do not have our other team members here, so we have a team who has been working for the event just the day before. Even Deep and I were on the talk show yesterday night, but a lot of them are tired, so they couldn't join us here.
Oh,
So maybe that's for our next time. Thank you so much.
cool. Thank you so much. Namaste.
Namaste.
Thank you so much, ma'am.
Thank you.